I hope you guys are okay and you can hear me fine. I hope there's no food stuck in my teeth. And basically, I named this presentation Experimental Approach to Writing Web and UI Copy. And it might have been as well named, actually, how do you know if what you write is actually working? You know, that's like the big question. Like, I know you guys are mainly designers probably, but if you are ever trying copy or working with copywriters, basically this is the question you might be asking, like, sure, maybe I can write, but is it really working? And that's something I'd like to talk about today. So a quick introduction. My name is Matous, and I wrote copy for several corporate businesses and startups. And for the past 5 years, I've been writing copy and creating content at Avocode. If you're not familiar with Avocode, it's a design collaboration platform that covers various jobs to be done or various use cases that goes for version control, prototyping, feedback, and design handoff. So moving forward, I want you guys to have two key takeaways from this presentation. So there are some tips, some best practices you guys can learn from this, stuff that you should always start with. It's going to be a bit similar to what Marina was talking about, maybe a slightly different take. Then I'll be talking about sort of this experimental approach to copy optimization. How do you actually can make sure that what you've written is working and it can be improved? So let's start with the best practices. So the best practices of digital copywriting, to be exact, because we're not going to be talking about copywriting in general. We're just going to be talking about digital copy, be it web copy or UI copy. Before we get any further, like I have to share my definition of copywriting because like most of my practices are actually relying on this definition. So what is copywriting, right? First of all, I think copywriting is assembling a few words, just a few, because a recent study by actually Nislam Norman Group, it's called, I think, How Do People Read Online or something, said that people rarely read online. You know, they're far more likely to scan and they never read word for word. And that's like the fundamental truth of copywriting, which hasn't changed like for the past 20 years. And this has very significant implications for creating digital content. What you're doing as a copywriter is essentially like stitching words together. You're combining words that work. You're not being paid to write poetry or like longer text. You hire because you know what words to choose. So that's really important, that you're assembling just a few words and the right ones. The second part of the definition is that you're assembling these few words in universal definition, universal stories, if you will. Basically, what I mean by universal stories is that in the beginning, especially when you're kicking off some writing project, you need to target a big audience. You cannot be sure if it's gonna work for this persona or this persona. Sure, you can do some research, but at the same time, like the best thing you can do in the beginning is to win the hearts of the masses, and then you can get to optimizing. So the word story, which is actually being overused slightly nowadays, is not that important here. The important word is universal. You're writing universal stories that elicit a feeling. What you're doing, again, as a copywriter, is you're buying people's attention. You know, you are not trying to like please them or entertain them. You're trying to grab their attention in the overcrowded marketing space. That's just the reality of it. And the way you do it is that you elicit a feeling. Like you want the reader to sympathize with your writing enough to care that he would keep reading. The last part of this definition is that you actually need to drive action, right? So let's read this again. Assembling a few words in universal stories that elicit a feeling and drive action. You're never going to get to action if you don't create a universal story that elicits a feeling. You need to drive actions so people would click, so people would buy, so people would subscribe, so people would come back, so you could retain your users. This is the business part of the writing. So you're always thinking about what's the action here. So quick summary here before we move on. So this means that you should pick a few words, write universally. You should be emotional, and you should always target one specific action, best not more. All right, so I've been doing this for about 8 years, and obviously this is not everything that I've learned. This is just the sort of essence of what copywriting is for me, and obviously there's a bit more. So I also learned that you should always start with what is it that you're selling, what is it that you're saying. And this is actually something that Marina touched upon, right? What are you writing about? So I want to show you just a quick few examples of SaaS business landing pages. And just bear in mind that the landing page is your pickup line. You know, it can make or break a deal. After your pickup line, the conversation with your potential lead or maybe your future girlfriend can go 1,000 ways. So you really need to be careful here. So let's take a look at GitLab. This is my personal favorite. Obviously, this is amazing copy. It's a bit ambitious, but not overselling one bit. They're delivering great value, and it has everything about what it is. It's an entire develop lifecycle in one application. This is what they're selling. Another good practice, but I might suggest a few tweaks, is the very favorite Notion. All-in-one workspace. What does that mean? It probably means that you can get any work done there. So you're probably going to have this app open all the time. I would maybe highlight the words write, notes, and docs, because these are the main actions you are going to be doing in Notion. But obviously, you know, this is another good example. What I don't really enjoy these days is Intercom, actually. Not that they wouldn't be smart, but they are kind of breaking my rules here. And you may disagree, and that's totally fine. But if you look at the headline here, deliver great experiences no matter what, it's a bit vague, you know, like you don't really know what they're selling yet. And you have to sort of like look below the input field to see it's some messenger, some messaging, and some bots. You know, that's what Intercom is about. Obviously, they are using this headline to sort of wrap a suite of products. It's also very important to realize that once you're selling more than just one thing, you need to choose a different communication, right? And all in all, this was not a critique of Intercom. This is just to show you that they are doing a very thorough A/B testing, actually. And if you check their website, like every month or maybe even every week, it keeps changing. And they have definitely some strong data to support that this headline actually does work, even though I may not like it. And during my copywriting years, I also learned that, you know, people know not just what you're selling, but what is it for. What's the number one thing that you're going to be doing? As I mentioned, for example, with Notion, that would be writing, right? So let's take a look at more examples. Drift, amazing chatbot experiences for sales. The first word we see here is connect. So you're connecting something with something. Okay, in the meantime, you might want to, you know, go on your websites, on your past projects, and check the copy there, because what is your pickup line? You know, like what verbs are you using? Are you doing enough to describe the number one action? Just to bear that in mind. Another example could be a book online course, you know, and then it goes on to be actually quite friendly here, genuinely friendly growth and startup mentors. Obviously, this messaging is a bit niche, but again, it totally follows the rule of number one action. Book online course. This is what you're going to be doing on this platform. I also learned that you should communicate value, and you should never put the feature of your product first. You should always put first the benefit. What I mean by that is, you know, like even an example of a recent website update is communicating that we're speeding something up. You know, we're speeding the process. Another great example might be Figma, like design together. This is the essence of Figma messaging. Like it's a bunch of people coming together, designing in one place. Immediately you get it. And the verb here is actually design. Before you get out there and start like trying these tips, always consider context. Like where do these people come from? You know, like how did they end up on your page? For example, we talked about Figma, designing together. So that's the key message. And how can you leverage that? Well, recently, Figma launched this microsite, design together even when you are apart. So basically, they're leveraging the current remote situation to enforce their messaging and basically get their brand out there to those remote designers. Another thing is Zendesk, actually. If you go on their landing page, is be there for your customers. Like I might argue that they're talking a bit about themselves and the call to actions might use a few verbs, but this is their general message. You know, you can understand they're all about being customer centric. And it's like, again, a great opportunity to leverage this messaging in a different case. So if you Google Zendesk and you go to their ads, which is #1 in the Google search, you actually end up on this landing page, which says, watch a demo. And this is an amazing example of how well Zendesk is sure what is the number one action that drives business. You know, is booking a demo, watching a demo, everything about the demo. Basically, if you don't book a demo, you're not moving forward. So they are leading all of the paid the paid segment customers or potential leads to this page to start with this one action. Obviously, you as a designer probably know something about credibility, right? How do you make people believe that your product is the right one? So look at Masterclass. You know, amazing website, amazing product, very well crafted marketing actually. And for them, it's quite simple, obviously. You know, learn from the best in the world. And if that's not enough, all those familiar faces are moving in the back of the video, and there are even logos of articles, and you know, it just works. But again, we mentioned context, right? So again, if you Google Masterclass and you go to their landing page on the first ad, you see this landing page: buy one annual membership, share one free. This is very like marketing driven jargon, but again, like you might not like it as a designer or whatever, but you know, it simply works. This is their winning offer and it helps them drive business. And that's what matters at the end of the day. So I would urge you to figure out what is the winning offer or the best thing you can offer the customer to start. You know about your action, what's the number one action that they should do. You know, for example, here, you're gonna get an annual membership to watch classes, right? And this is their winning offer to sort of enforce that action. All right, obviously this is not all. We talked about the first pickup line, the first action that makes or breaks the deal. It's actually, why it's so important is that it's at the beginning of your marketing funnel. And before the people come to your product and touch all these nice buttons you designed in the like middle of it, let's say, you need to make sure that all the entry points to the product work just fine before you move further. So I'd like to share with you a few tips how to make your copy more actionable. And to do that, I borrowed a few examples from Polaris, which is a free design system of Shopify. It's a very nice website documenting all of their components, how you should be using them. And besides all those design components, they are actually pretty strong in communicating tips for copywriters and how you should structure your communication if you're building a Shopify product. And don't worry, like some of the stuff that's coming forward, I myself actually make a lot of mistakes in them, and myself am guilty from them. So we're all here to learn. You know, it's totally fine. By the way, I didn't cover this in my presentation, but I noticed that they even cover things like the dispute between the verb select and choose, which is quite frequent in UI design. So I encourage you to go to their website and read all about it. So I just borrowed a few examples here. The first one is just like, don't worry about articles, you know, the and all those articles in UI copy and micro copy. You don't have to worry about them. It's like, these are not general rules. These are recommendations from Shopify. But again, like, look at the amounts of customers and experience they have in the field. And I honestly believe that there's something about that. Moving forward, so start with imperative words, you know, like, again, be actionable. Add your first product and see how it looks like. Instead of going with, products appear in your store after you add them. Like, yeah, sure, that's nice, but like, what are you actually trying to tell me? Like, what should I do here, you know? Links are labels, not separate words. This is a very frequent mistake that we even ourselves do sometimes in our onboarding processes and models and so on, that we sometimes include words like click below, click here, and so on. And this is just like not right. You know, it's not the early 90s when you would have to just use hypertext links on the web, but basically you can use very neat UI. So leverage the buttons, you know, leverage the microcopy you have in the buttons, and always connect the headline with the button. And the sort of the explanatory copy is just like, how do you get there? You know, like, you can use the link to sort of emphasize certain words and make them actionable. A few more lessons I'm going to be sharing from myself and basically the content I've read throughout the years. So a big topic is the you versus we, you know, like, what do you do? Like, do you talk about yourself? Do you talk about the customer? And I read a very interesting quote that the word using the word you to recapture attention is something you simply do. This word hits the reader with a microdose of dopamine that momentarily recaptures her attention. What that means basically is that when you're skimming through the content, because in the beginning we mentioned that people don't read anymore, unfortunately. So these words work like anchors. You know, you just like see them, they grab your attention on, oh, okay, it's about me. That's nice. You know, what else is there? So that's just like a general practice, but I would strongly encourage you to always like go with you and not we. This is sort of a paradox and then long dispute topic about using dots at the end of titles and headlines. And it's actually quite simple. The dot or full stop is exactly what it is. You know, it stops your thinking. It's like, this is the end of something. And in digital copy, you have to think about, like, do I want people to keep reading, or is this enough? You know, is it just one headline and button, or do I want them to keep reading? And some newspapers actually use this practice because it is essentially coming from newspapers, that the headlines, unless there were two sentences in the headline, we're never using punctuation at the end, unless it was a question mark. And basically, this encourages the person to keep reading. So some designers might argue, well, adding a full stop might add to the boldness of my design copy. You know, like, this is what I want. It's a statement. It's part of the typography, part of the design. Sure, if it serves your purpose, but you better know what you're doing. You shouldn't be just like throwing full stops in the copy because you think it's cool. Don't start a sentence with a don't. To be actionable, stay positive. So, for example, in this case would be avoid starting a sentence with a don't. Or, start a sentence with a do is the positive way of rephrasing this. So just like, again, think of that you're not trying to build gates for the person. You're trying to build bridges, and you should let them in as much as you want. So one more lesson which we need to do serious work on, even here at Avocode, and I actually experienced this with a couple of other businesses, basically naming things consistently. And because, especially if you're a dev-driven company, or let's say engineering or logistics company, you might have a lot of internal jargon, especially when you're building something new. You have a way of naming things, and then somehow you accidentally slip them into the product, and you don't even know if actually people are using these words to name those things that you're talking about. So just bear that in mind, that naming things consistently is essential. It's not just your internal meetings, it's all your documentation, help center, it's all your product. To show you quite personally, without any criticism, how we struggle with this internally, there are a few examples. One place in Avocode where you put all your designs is called officially the project manager, but it's actually also design files. It's actually your projects. So, and every time you're using those words with the customer, you should know where you're navigating them, because you might actually create confusion. Same thing with our inspect mode, or something we internally used to call document view or design view. Again, it might create confusion, even though it's just like for inspecting the design and getting all the specs. But it's not perfect right now. And soon we'll be like probably rebranding some of those parts of the app. So it's an ongoing process. You're never done with this stuff. Just like keep in mind that when you decide on something, really enforce that this term is being used across all of your communication. I also learned that copywriting should never call attention to itself. And this is something that I read recently from a great copywriter called Gene Schwartz. And honestly, I'm going to quote here because there is no way I could put it any better. So just listen and enjoy a beer, I guess. The one thing I hate most in the world and shows me absolute disaster is, is when somebody comes up to me and says, wow, the headline is so beautiful. Where did you get those words? They're gorgeous. By the way, I would say it's like when you come to a photograph and you have a dope camera, like I bet you make amazing pictures. It's something similar. So where did you get those words? They're gorgeous, I say. Oh God, are you seeing the words? Not seeing through the words? You're seeing the words themselves? Well, then it's no good. If you want to write poetry, and if you want to write prose, if you want to write novels, and if you want to write literature, go outside of advertising and marketing. Words in advertising are like the windows in a store. It's very important. Windows in a store. You must be able to look right through them and see the product. If you see the window, it's dirty, and you're going to see yourself, in the reflection, or going to see the smear, you're not going to see the product, and you're going to lose. In other words, the copy should never call attention to itself. Your prospect should essentially forget it's like they're reading altogether. Those words are like part of the design. They should just like breeze through them without noticing. And even I would use a familiar quote from Elon Musk, actually, which is my favorite, is that basically when something needs a manual to explain, it's badly designed. So like when you need a lot of documentation to explain how something works, you might want to consider redesigning the whole thing. Like Hemingway or the Hemingway app itself, just edit sober, cut all the unnecessary words and the clutter out of your sentences. And again, don't take this any like personally. I'm also guilty of always writing too long, but this is why it's essential for me to work with other team members to ask for their feedback and discuss with designers if my copy is not too long for those bounding boxes and so on. So this is like a wrap up of the first part of the presentation. You might want to refill your drinks. If there are any questions in the meantime, feel free to shoot on the chat. Okay, let's have some questions first, and then we can do the second part.
Yeah, there are a couple of them there, so just read them.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna start from the bottom. What about using dot in a sentence, for instance, in pop-ups, when we have only one sentence? How do you evaluate microcopy? Yeah, so really start from the end about evaluation. That's going to be the whole second part of this presentation, so don't worry, you'll see all about it. And using a dot in a sentence, for instance, in a pop-ups, you know what? I would just go with consistency here. Like it doesn't matter like if you do it with a dot or not. Just like stick with one way. And if it's just one sentence, I would never actually put a dot there, even though you might find it somewhere in our communication, which would be a mistake from my perspective. However, the only way where I would put a dot after a sentence is if you have two sentences in a headline. For example, do you need to speed up your communication? Try this tool, you know, or something like this. So there would be a question mark, and then there would be a dot at the end of the second sentence. All right, so if there are no more questions, let's move to the other part. So let's say you know all of these copy tips and these best practices of digital copywriting. There is some stuff you simply cannot read in any books or learn from blog posts. So the question that I want to ask you, and you probably are asking yourself, is, are you a good copywriter? You know, if you follow all of those tips. And quite honestly, I don't think so. Like, sure, you might be good at assembling sentences. You might be good at invoking readability in people, and you might be a good entertainer. But a good copywriter is, I think, more data-driven. You know, a good copywriter knows that the words that he chose carefully work, and if they don't, he's happy to change them and adjust them for the better. Just to clarify, recently I read an article, like an interview with a copywriter and web consultant called Jill Andrews. And they asked her what was her biggest professional failure that she learned from. And basically she mentioned that it was to never assume anything. Never assume anything that you know better, you know? Like in copywriting, you really need to, maybe also in design generally, because, you know, it's very connected to it, but you guys might prove me wrong, is that basically you need to avoid assumptions and you have to test your ideas. You know, there is no better way in growth marketing to do that than through experiments, actually. So this is what I want to show you. Don't take it that this is like something you have to do. I just want to show it more of a case study of something that we've been doing for the past year and a half at Avocode, and it had a significant impact on our metric. I can see that there are a few more questions. Yeah, assumption is a mother of all fuck-ups. Definitely agree with that one. Mike would add at least most of them. Yeah, actually, to clarify, if you have no data or no way of testing your ideas, you know, because I'll show you it's not that easy, you will have to do some hard guesses, you know, like especially in the beginning, it's a guessing game. Like you will never have research about all of your potential leads and all the market fits in the world. You just have to start somewhere. So in the beginning, when you're kickstarting something and you don't have the capacity to test and do thorough research, that's the place for assumptions. But later on, I don't think so. All right, so we're moving on to the unknown waters of where copywriting is not necessarily working, or you don't know if it's working. You just have to try and find the hard way. So how do you start with experimental approach towards copywriting? how do you start testing if your ideas work? Well, you have to start somewhere. So I'm going to be talking about testing copy on your website to start with at the first example. But before we get there, you need to know what you're measuring. What is the one metric that you're going to be looking at? For example, on a website, is it just the click-through of a button? So you're doing everything you can to increase that click-through of the button? Or is it a bigger part of the marketing funnel? For example, the whole sign-up rate, which means that the person is not only clicking through, but he's probably fulfilling some actions after he clicks, right? And those two are different things. So before you start, you need to ask the right questions. What are you trying to find out? In the upcoming experiment, we are trying to find out the overall sign-up rate increase. So not just that people click on the buttons, but if they actually sign up after clicking on the buttons, which is very connected to the expectations they have from the button. So let's say we would be targeting just the click-throughs. That would be nice, but it doesn't mean that your experiment is actually working because, sure, those people like the headline, they clicked, but what if they see something they didn't expect in the next step and they don't fulfill the action that you're asking them? Remember carefully that masterclass was asking you to subscribe for a yearly membership, or Growth Mentor is asking you to book calls. So I bet their entry point metric is actually the sign up. So in this video, I want to shoot. I don't know if it's working. Yeah, it's working. So we've built this little application on our web, which is basically allowing us to click through multiple variants of copy that we have on the web. It's just like an interim little product, but it helps us to organize all of our experiments better and to navigate through what's currently running out there. So I'm not going to tell you here which one worked the best. Basically, you need to know that we are frequently A/B testing this actually on 2 weekly basis. And I don't think we have found the best headline yet. It's a long-term search. So to go about this, obviously, we use words that performed well in the past experiments. But we keep doing, research in the Search Console, how people are coming. We're using Uber Suggest to see if there is some low-hanging fruit in terms of keywords and so on. If all of this is new to you and you're asking how should you experiment as a designer, I would encourage you to take it all very positively. Because if you start experimenting, very soon you will find out that some of the stuff that you're doing is not working. Some of your designs were probably not very good designs, and like we all know designers, it might hurt your feelings a bit, but this is totally fine. Like, you're doing this to learn, to make better decisions. So work as much as you can with other people in your company, with copywriters and data specialists, to keep pushing your designer game forward. To show you how we are working internally between designers and copywriters, or how we used to do it in the past, I'd like to show you this experiment. This is our tutorial website. It's basically an SEO machine, if you will, and that's inviting all the people who are searching for these queries and might find an answer in Avocode actually to our website. And before they start reading, we had an idea that our technology actually allows you to import Photoshop, Sketch, XD, Figma, any Illustrator, any design file, even on the web without design tools, and access all of its layers, right? So these people are searching, how can I export PSD layer group, or artboards as JPEG from Photoshop? Sure, you can do this in Photoshop, but what if you don't have Photoshop and just you have the Photoshop file, right? So we wanted to invite these people to upload their design and get the job done for free on our website. And we were testing 3 options. On the top, this is the part that's like textual. Simply select your files to start. That's the version number 1. Then version number 2 is not textual, but it was like this kind of like pop-up where you could just drag and drop the files. And version number 3 was this large area where you would import your Photoshop file, and then you could get the job done. So before I move on, I want to ask you guys, like, which one of these do you think performed the best? Just like, you know, let's try a guessing game here. So the first one is purely textual. The second one is sort of like a pop-up. And the third one is a drag and drop area. So let's see some answers. Okay. 3, last one, or 2, says Anton. Yeah, okay, you guys are pretty clever. It was actually number 3, but how do you know? You know, how can you be sure? And this is what I want to show you. Like, some things might be a bit obvious, you might say. Like, yeah, the drag and drop area evokes that I can drag and drop my design, maybe more than this like slightly annoying pop-up from the bottom, and this version is probably not too visible. However, I want to show you why it doesn't pay off always to trust the Dr. Obvious. You know, I warned you against assumptions. So I'm gonna show you my own mistake that I'm actually guilty of, and I'm very proud I learned the lesson. And it's basically that I thought that in our sign-up flow, I could customize the copy a bit, right? So if you're signing up for a free trial of Avocode, this is basically, that's what you see. It's like, hey there, you know, and sure, it's working nicely, but I thought, like, maybe depending on the context, where you're coming from, which part of the web, because, you know, our web is quite complex nowadays. So we have people coming from multiple microsites and so on. So what if we changed the copy, for example, like this, you know? There's a section on our product page about handoff with Avocode, and there's a button, try Avocode for free, right? And it's from a section that's clearly talking about design handoff. So the copy would read, speed up handoff and coding with Avocode today. You know, it has all these actionable keywords that we're learning about in the first section. And I thought, like, you know, you sort of, it's going to even increase your expectation, right? So here you're reading about specs, handoff, and basically saving time on front end. And then you would just like see a headline like this. Well, long story short, this hey there performed much better than my customized headline. And actually, I took all the time to do this like 20 times so that it would be really contextual, like wherever you're coming from, I would write different copy for that. But it didn't work, you know? But the good thing is that I learned the lesson in 1 week. And actually, we are able to collect enough data in 1 week. However, this is something I should definitely mention here, is that what is the like frequency of how often you test. And the simple answer to that is basically test only when you are certain that you've gathered significant amount of data. So it really depends on your product traffic. I would say like those numbers should be at least in tens or hundreds to be like enough to make a decision to move further. But depending on how long it takes you to collect this amount of data, that's how often you should be experimenting and exchanging your content and design on the web and in your product, obviously. Another obvious assumption we had some, let's say, offer for people who are trying to hack our service a bit. Basically, some people were coming back and they were just like using the free trial, which is damaging our business because, we are building a solid product, which is obviously paid. And we think it's totally fair that you pay for a product that's actually helping you save time and money. So, but we didn't want to totally block these people, even though we could, but we didn't want to do that, So we gave them an offer. Basically, we offered them that, like, if this time they sign up, they're going to get something special. And we thought that, again, what if we localized this offer, right? What if we changed it to other languages? However, again, this didn't work because it seems that it didn't fit in the entire flow. When you enter an English page and suddenly you see a Russian modal, it's kind of sketchy, isn't it? It's like too targeted. You probably feel weird, and we learned a lesson again here, but how could we know if we didn't try? So maybe someone in the beginning asked about localization, and this would be also my answer. Just try and see how it impacts your metric that you care about. Word of advice, because we're moving slightly towards the product, and I think this is going to be almost the last experiment that I'm going to be showing you, is when you think of actionable copywriting, you need to know which action comes first. Because when people are on your website, sure, you might figure out what's the #1 thing. But when they enter the product, things get more complicated because there are high chances that your product is actually covering more use cases, right? So we did a simple test in a place we call the empty state in Avocode. And that's basically when you create a project and you are supposed to add some designs there. So we did a variant which was working like this. So this is version 2 and this is version 1. Let's do this guessing game again. So actually, to clarify, the metric that we were measuring here was not adding designs, but inviting people. So it's a secondary action, but still very important, right? So in the first version, you can see that it's slightly under the button. It's written there, an underlined link. And in the second option, it's in this drop-down a visual icon. So let's see on the chat who thinks which perform better for invitations. Okay. A lot of people seem to think that the more visual variant is performing better. Let's wait for a few more. Okay. Well, to crush your dreams a bit, it was the first variant. It was the one with the underlined text. Again, we might come with some hypotheses why it is so. I would say so that in the second part, it's simply hidden in a drop-down. Here it's clearly visible, and you can see that there are like 2 actions, but here is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 actions, 7 actions, with the initial button, and that's just too many. So you need to clarify what is the #1 thing and even #2 thing that activates the people when they're entering your product. It's cool, right? Who could have guessed? So a couple of points before we wrap up. So what do you need to optimize your copy? Well, basically you need the metric. You need to be sure that you have the question and the metric. What are you trying to find out? Absolutely no hurt feelings. Like, this is not personal. It's cruel optimization game. You just, you cannot bluff those designs, those sentences. You just have to kill the ones that don't work. It's cruel, but that's what works. And no guesses. Like, honestly, this helped us a lot, even in terms of management in Avocode, because obviously, you've dealt with other people in terms of creative collaboration, And we are all so opinionated, aren't we? Like, we think that this headline is going to definitely like smash it totally. You know, this button is exactly in the right position. But there, like, we learned through experiments that whenever someone around the table is starting to go a little crazy with these ideas, we have this like sentence that we keep saying, you know, let's not come up with solutions yet. You know, like, we're still like planning it. Like, we don't know yet. You know, it's a variant, it's an option, but like, we'll see when we learn. So this has really helped us in terms of all those meetings about any creative process. And yeah, keep an open mind and the student attitude that you are learning. You know, there's no better way that actually learning on your own business, on your own project. It keeps pushing you forward. It doesn't mean it's going to work elsewhere, but in your current job, this is the way how you actually improve and grow as an individual. And two last remarks. How can you run experiments faster? Obviously, you know, like, we have a quite complex process of how we plan, evaluate, and deploy new experiments. I can talk about that in the Q&A if you want. But the number one thing that matters is if you can be fast and if you can be flexible. And that means running experiments, like really deploying them on a weekly to weekly basis. And you should be able to go tonight and change something on the website, you know, and if you don't have the infrastructure or the team to do that, you might want to think about restructuring that, because it's really going to help you grow much faster. So the thing we did in terms of building new websites and new experiments is that we started building our own pre-coded design system, not just design components, but actually smart components in terms of code. So what you see here is a documentation of all the components that we are currently using on the web. And obviously this is an internal project. However, like, anybody who can code can come here and start assembling a page. So this has helped us to deploy new things very fast. And the last thing that I'm pretty excited about as a former and actually even current copywriter is how do you work better with designers? And I think there was a question before about like overlapping microcopy, right? And how do you make sure that what the copywriter writes in some document is going to work in the design? Or how do you answer the chicken egg problem, like what comes first, if it's design of wireframe or copy? You know, like, honestly, we don't have the right answer because you cannot know what comes first. But you can definitely improve the collaboration between designers and copywriters. And I'm quite pleased to like show you a little sneak peek of what we're cooking in the Avocode kitchen. Because like, our vision is to make the whole design process more inclusive. You know, we already made it possible for developers to interact with design files and inspect them without design tools, even on the web. You know, like, we want anyone to interact with design files. And obviously, like, since we solved that for developers, we're noticing other important roles in the creative process, like product managers, UX researchers, and copywriters. By the way, for all the UX people out there, we recently launched a prototyping beta, so you can actually start prototyping all Sketch, XD, and Figma files in Avocode on the web. You don't even need design tools, actually. And we are planning to do the same for copywriters. So this is a really like a secret project that we're currently working on. It's something we call Avocode Writer. And you can think of it as an online editor that would enable copywriters to open and enter layers of any Photoshop, Illustrator, XD, Sketch, or Figma design and interact with them, meaning rewriting their content without manipulating the design elements and layers. And this is how it looks like. So you can see that there's some text field, see more. This is just like a screencast of the prototype. And you can see that like in the context of the design, you will be rewriting the actual text field. The design tool will tell you if the copy is too long. If it's overlapping, it will not probably let you to overlap it. And you can do this all over the artboards and basically save all your text edits and then either share the link with the designer so he can sync it back to the design file, or if you're like a designer, copywriter, something in one person, you could actually do it yourself. You could just go ahead and sync all those text changes back to design. I think in terms of the syncing back to design, we're starting with Sketch. This is something that you should be seeing hopefully in the summer. If anyone wants some beta access or would like to consult their use cases, how do you guys like collaborate between designers and copywriters? Just let me know at my email, matous@avocode.com. Yeah, like I think this is a wrap. And yeah, you can go to the bathroom now.
Cool. Cool. So guys and girls, don't hesitate to ask the questions. You remember that you have two options. You can text them or you can ask them in loud. Just raise the hand and yeah, so we have the first question.
Okay, readability of the copy. That's a good one. Luckily, we have a front-end engineer who actually wrote his bachelor thesis on readability and accessibility. So he knows a lot about like basically what's good or not. It's already kind of like in his head. But there are many plugins. I think some even from Google that basically check readability for you, and not just readability, but legibility, you know, the contrast of the text on the background and so on. And just Google those or connect with me later. I can connect you guys. And again, this is also connected to consistency. You know, obviously, as your design develops, you might want to keep those things in check. So, for example, if you're using some shades of some color, always check if it's still visible. Set some limits, some like for the minimum size of the text. And actually, I think there's some great inspiration in the Google material design about what's the limit of the font size. And yeah, then you know, like as a designer, you should probably know something about typography. So like, don't probably go for something too crazy unless you know what you're doing. If reading is the purpose of the website, if it's to entertain or something, or to showcase some case study, you might gonna go wilder with font styles that you choose. And generally speaking, the words, if they are readable, if they are working, we are also using Grammarly and Hemingway and Typeable and all these like internal tools that are helping us to fix the copy in the first phase. But you cannot see everything with just two eyes. You know, it's all about collaboration. So we have a few rounds of feedback on any like important content that's going out. And by important, I mean if it's reaching a larger audience than usual. Okay, Yana is asking, do you have any quick recommendations for announcements of a new feature? The goal is to encourage people to check it out, especially when it comes to modals, pop-up messages, when there is not much room for copy. Apart from avoiding fillers, unnecessary words, is there any type of words that work best from your experiences? Maybe you A/B tested the length or something else. Yeah. So again, starting from the end, I think you should always aim for something short. I think I covered in detail why like your website or model in your case should not be a novel. So I would just go for one sentence in the headline, 2 lines paragraph, 1 button. I think much more important than the words is if the copy of the headline is clearly connected with the button. That's something that really resonates also or works with email marketing. So there's like a golden rule that the subject should also like be the entry point to what is the call to action in the email. So we should find it there, you know, like what you're promising. And regarding words, you know, like, sure, you probably can find all those articles about using free, now, today, and actionable verbs. Sure, you can do that. Some of that stuff works. But then it's about your message and your own brand, you know, like you should be able to distinguish yourself a bit. And generally speaking, like I can really say that the word free works every time. Yeah. Okay, are there any other questions from the panelists and attendees?
Come on, I guess that all people are quite tired, but
Yeah, I can
because of
imagine.
a lot of information, I guess, not just because of the time. I have the question.
Thank you for your patience, guys, really. And if you want to get the slides and maybe something extra like our free ebook, just go to this QR code or the link there, and you can find the presentation, keynote, or PDF. And feel free to connect with me.